Good morning, New York, and good afternoon, London. Welcome to our Facebook Live show today, Tech Encounters with Ramona. I am so happy to be hosting my show from London, a great city for technology. And since I was here and Mark was here, I decided to invite him to my Facebook Live show to have him talk to us about how blockchain is changing global economy and capital markets. And Mark is the CEO of Maxonrow, a leader in blockchain space. And welcome, Mark. Thank you for being here today and taking time of your day.
Thank you, Ramona. I'm happy to be here. So, very glad you could come over to London and visit us.
Thank you. So before we go on, one of the reasons Mark is in London is that Maxonrow is hosting an event today. And I would like to invite everyone to sign up, to register if you haven't done so. You can find the event on eventbrite.com and look up Maxonrow or how blockchain is changing the world. If you don't find it, send us a message on the comment section and we'll be happy to send you the link. There is still time to register. The event is at 6 o'clock today at the WeWork in 131 Finsbury. Yes. And so moving on, Mark, I know you have an impressive career. I know you have, prior to working in blockchain, you worked with virtual reality, and there were a few other things that you did before, which sound amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what you do today for Maxonrow?
Sure. I actually was not in, I'd say, software development for a very long time. I was always into retail development and brand development. Did that for many years over in Taipei, Shenzhen, Shanghai, mostly Greater China. We did quite a few different deployments, and when I got involved in the blockchain space, it was when the company Maxonrow wanted to turn the corner between just developing the infrastructure and actually start to target real businesses and to affect the real economy. Because blockchain has gone through an explosive growth phase where there's been a lot of interest and a lot of investment, but there's a whole nother level that it has to go to before we start using it in retail spaces or to facilitate brand development or to facilitate multi-country development, which is what the technology really works for. So since I had a lot of experience doing brick and mortar and putting payment systems into those brick and mortar across different jurisdictions, across different countries, with different tax rules, it's actually quite difficult. Blockchain takes a lot of that away. So that was how I got involved with Maxonrow, is we were starting to make the effort to integrate with the real businesses out there and give them a more efficient, more secure way to do their inter-country or cross-border or cross-nation business. So that's how I came here. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting. Look, I work with a lot of businesses that have challenges with payment processing and just financial transactions. So I can't wait to see what blockchain is going to do for those businesses. So I'm so happy to see that we're moving in the direction of improving the way transactions move across from businesses to businesses.
And just to say, blockchain, I think it was such a broad topic that I don't think people really understood that it actually works in different industries. And you're talking about it in payments, that's one application. There's also a lot of future applications. That's one of the easier applications. It's one of the more directly applicable applications. But you're seeing it going into legal, right? You're seeing it into regulatory tech. You're seeing it go into digital assets, tangible assets, which is something we want to do in the future. And I think people are maybe not aware of how this technology can affect so many different things. But it is a lot like the internet, where it can be applied in so many different things. It's such a broad-ranging system, or I should say set of systems, that it may have been confusing to a lot of people as to what does it actually do. And there's a lot of special, like you just mentioned, fintech. actually there's a lot of companies that are just focusing on the bank-to-bank transfers, the ability to move money from one country to another, and they're using blockchain to actually secure that. And let me ask you a question. Do you know why they call it blockchain, what it's all about?
Yeah, so it is. There's a set of blocks that connect to each other in theory, and it's a ledger. So it keeps track of the life of a transaction over time. And there are different blocks that connect to each other. You can explain it better, but to me, when someone said to me, it's a ledger and it keeps track of the life cycle of a transaction, it was very exciting because I had seen that in other ways in the areas that I'm in accounting or finance.
Yes.
But you can probably explain it a lot better than I did.
No, I think that's a good way to explain it. I think a great way to explain it is shared reality, right? A shared understanding of who owns what or who has what and where. And it, instead of that being a single entity like a bank or a single entity like a credit card processor, that reality is spread out among different parties. And it's that spreading out of that reality that actually provides the security because their computer systems are all tracking it in the same way. And because there's almost no limit to what you track, and there's almost no limit to how you create that system, is why we've seen it just moving into so many different areas. And if you look at the business projections today from, say, Deloitte or KPMG, you'll see that somewhere around 40 to 50% of companies, and let's say that again, 40 to 50% of companies, 40 to 50% of companies are actually looking at blockchain and how it can affect their business. And 40 to 50% are saying there's definitely going to be ways that we're going to integrate in the next few years.
This 40 to 50%, is it industry specific or site specific or just?
I mean, we're talking about, and I have to refer to a specific survey to have a specific answer, but generally speaking, anybody that's touching any type of technology, even e-commerce, selling anything that touches the web is looking at doing some sort of integration with blockchain right now.
Yes, and I mean, since you talk about surveys, I read somewhere that PwC did a survey that found that about 70% of financial services industry companies will be using blockchain by 2020. So that's pretty big. That's
in
huge.
Specific centers, you're talking about, maybe even everyone.
Yes.
If you looked at retailers, how many retailers do not have an e-commerce channel right now, right? And I think a good way for people to understand what's happening in the industry is to look at what happened with internet maybe a decade ago. I think it was about 12 years ago, right, where we had a lot of growth and you had a lot of new things happening that people weren't very familiar with and maybe even weren't comfortable with. I remember back then hearing about Amazon never making money for so many years as an IPO company, and now look at what the reality is that so I think blockchain in a lot of ways, the industry is going to revolutionize how we think about this type of industry as well.
And I know that one of the concepts that Maxonrow is leading with is the tokenizing process. Can you tell us about that?
Sure.
It's very interesting to me.
You've probably heard about blockchain. You've probably heard about Bitcoin, which is an application of blockchain where people are storing value. And then there's a new concept. We won't call it a new concept, but we'll call it a newly popular concept that we call tokenizing. And it's tokenizing assets. It's tokenizing real world things, items. And what we're looking at mostly is tokenizing assets that have some sort of a tangible documentation behind them, such as a title, such as some sort of ownerships that you can prove, and making digital representations of those things, items, and then being able to fractionally own, sell, trade, and do all the other fun things that blockchain let us to do once you make it. And you are seeing research coming out on this. This is actually going to be probably the largest area that, beyond the finance and transferring of payments, it's probably the biggest use case for blockchain. Is it gives you a new way to own and exchange ownership of things, and we call it tokenizing because you're taking what you own and you're making some digital movements through an app, and then you're creating tokens that are based on that thing. I mean, this could be art, it could be property, it could be cars. The sky's the limit in a certain extent, and our platform is actually about not judging what could or could not be tokenized, but rather letting the entrepreneurs and just making sure that it's in a secure environment, that it's been verified, and that we're following all the laws and regulations.
And I don't know if you know this, but I wonder if it's going to replace the way fixed assets and other assets are tracked from an accounting perspective, where we, today we try to serialize items within the accounting ledger. So is this going to replace somehow what we do on the accounting side?
I can't speak to that. I would love to, maybe get an accounting guy in here. Yeah, maybe they won't. I can't, from our aspect, we can't really predict how this is going to affect how people do things. But what we can say is that the people that are attracted or would benefit from this is a set of people that is currently underrepresented in capital markets and it does not really have access to a lot of the tools that are built to help people grow their businesses. And when I say that, I mean, it's pretty hard for a normal business person in Michigan to access equity markets. It's not impossible, definitely, but it's difficult, it's expensive. And most of those activities are centered in a region. And there's investment banks that help people do it, there's lawyers, there's accounting firms that help people do it. But if you really go to the business people that are running the businesses and you say, could you produce a debt instrument and sell that debt bond? There's a lot of really good businesses all over America, all over the world, that just could not do that right now. And our platforms, the platforms that we're developing, are targeted for that. It's to allow people who own things, who have businesses, and maybe it's not big enough to list on Wall Street, to go to an IPO, to spend millions of dollars, to have the relationships in place. But access to capital markets shouldn't rely on relationships. It should rely on your business. It should be from how you're running your business and whether someone else wants to invest in it, and then also whether you're following the rules. And this is where the blockchains and regulatory space, regulatory tech come together, and that's where we are. We're combining the idea that entrepreneurs should do their business and that they should have the ability to tokenize and have all those tools that capital markets have right now. And if you build it smart, it also follows the regulations, and you can have safety and security at the same time. And I think that's revolutionary. And I think that's going to help a lot of people, not just in America or Europe or London, where we are today, but I think this is a huge influence on a lot of unbanked areas, and a lot of areas where they went past the brick and mortar credit card systems, banks, put my money in the bank, and they went straight to mobile. Because this technology means that every person with a mobile phone is equal. As long as you have mobile internet, you have access to these.
Good for Apple and the other.
Yeah, good for Apple. Maybe that's a good stock to buy.
What's the other company?
I mean, you've got all the smartphone, and most of it's on Android and iOS right now. But yeah, even web-based, all right? There's still very good web-based technology wallets that you can access. They're very secure as well. So it's not just limited to one or two platforms.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned access to capital is sometimes limited to a certain group, because we notice that a lot of times businesses don't have access to capital because they fall within a certain industry or group of people. So it's going to, this is going to be amazing. It's going to definitely change the life of a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners.
We hope so. We have to, and I think there's still some time that the industry needs to mature. But the first use cases, the first applications are going to be coming out in the next year or two. We see supply chain applications with results coming out this year. We see fintech applications with results. We've seen it in, I know there's Tabir's is doing a diamond project. There's a lot of use cases where the results are just amazing. And so we're hoping that in the next few years, if you grew up with paper titles and doing things via phone, you may be a little bit uncomfortable with doing everything with mobile, right? But the younger generation doesn't share that reality. They grew up with mobile, and they're happy that it's all on their phone. And so we think that generationally, this is just going to be the way it's done in a few years. It's not going to have, because they won't have the same hang-ups about maybe, oh, I want to see my, how many people actually get a stock certificate now that own stock? No one, but that was actually a thing back in the day. So we think that mobile will be the same platform for a lot of this asset transfer, tokenization of assets, and it's just going to be faster, better.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see what happens. I know there is another concept that is also, in the case of Maxonrow and blockchain in general, but the concept of KYC, know your customer.
Okay.
How does that come into play here?
So originally, a lot of the software that was produced, they have a wallet address that they call pseudo-anonymous, which means it's not tied to any identity. It's just an address, and that address is somewhere where you can send and receive funds, and it's not tied to anything. And I'm sure there's a lot of applications where that's fine, and you don't really need, when you're going and buying a Coca-Cola from the store, you don't need to log who bought that Coke and who owned it and how much it was. I mean, you do have to turn in a receipt, but there's a lot of applications where you don't need to really know who is spending what. But that's not so true about selling your house. You wouldn't want to anonymously sell your house to an address that and no one would ever know whose it was. And so the concept of KYC is something that the banking industry uses to identify people. Who are you? Where do you live? What's your job? And then make sure that they know who's doing what, to make sure that you're not, violating anti-money laundering rules are kept, and you're not, you are who you say you are. So our system actually made a system where we can actually have KYC on chain. And we believe we've never seen anyone else with this, so we'd like to say we're the first. That we believe is a front runner to ownership, right? You need to know who owns what. It needs to be secure. It needs to be encrypted, and it needs to be fast and efficient, and that's what we built. And then hopefully in the future, as the industry develops, we can have other types of ownership also on chain, and you can begin to freely exchange assets and ownership of things through your phone.
Great. I know there is a similar, process that suppliers and vendors go through.
Yes.
You have to do a lot of due diligence for the same reason that you mentioned, terrorism, anti-money laundering.
Yes.
Is that at some point can that be applied?
Well, it's generally the same process. Actually, if you looked at our KYC process and signing up for an online bank, it would be very similar. And it's just basically the world is getting better and better at allowing you to put your identity into a digital certificate, verifying that it is you using that mobile device, and then having those transactions be yours. Digital identity is a new thing for us, really, for the world, but it's something that is developing very fast, and I think you'll see this is going to be digital identity itself is just going to be very quick. Everybody's going to have their own digital identity. The phones and the mobile and the web is going to have a way to verify it, and this is a better solution to what's happening now, where in every database you have a record.
Yes.
And in 20 databases, they all own your information. This is slightly different. This is you have been identified once, right? And now that's you, and you don't need to store your data over there, because we know that's you from your communication between your device and our device.
So I might not even have to carry my driver's license one day.
We hope that. And actually, we're doing a product called Digital ID, where you can store digital passport, where you can actually store your passport, your driver's license. And if, there's quite a few governments that are looking into enabling that in the entire country. So,
I love that.
Yeah, that's the dream, right? Is to have your wallet and then go through passport control that way. And you've got, so that's the dream.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know how many times we forget our passports at home? Well, I
wow.
do. At least once. My brother did once and friends.
Sure.
So
Sure.
this would like save us a lot of time.
Yeah.
Do you encounter challenges as you enter into this space, and anything that you can share with the audience on how they can learn more about blockchain and feel comfortable with the concept?
I think the space itself is very challenging for people who are interested in tokenizing things. You have to get a little bit educated right now, and that's just because it's such a broad topic. But if you really want to get, our biggest challenge was identifying this tokenization process. And again, regulation was not made for this, right? The current regulation, you see it in the news all over the world, it's written for the paper era. It barely got to internet era, and suddenly we leapfrogged to blockchain, which is a decentralized era. And so regulation is still catching up. So a lot of the systems are still a little bit behind what we can actually do. So I think the challenge is really just staying up on what's happening. This industry is moving at light speed, and you really need to look into everything you're doing before you do it. So I would encourage people to really read up on anything they're doing. You can read up on our project and read some white papers, and just kind of try to educate themselves, especially if you have business, I'd say multi-site business, and anything that uses databases, uses membership information, uses customer information, and then transfers value back and forth. And then anything in the assets industry where you're transferring an asset back and forth between people. Those are some spaces, that's what we're investing in and that's what we're developing in, and we believe those are going to move light speed because the use of those systems after you implement is just, it's worlds different, it's completely different.
And all businesses have assets. I mean, most businesses will have assets,
business
right?
assets.
All assets, that's what we do. So most businesses will benefit from the technology. I know Maxonrow hosts global meetups to bring communities together, to build the blockchain community. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. We make a platform. A platform is for entrepreneurs. And we try to make entrepreneurs realize that, by the way, now you have another option. You have the option to tokenize your business. It's there. And we provide the KYC process is, I will say, is technically difficult. If a person wants to develop a system that does what our system does, it's going to take a very long time. And that's kind of why we developed it, is so other people can use it, take advantage of that technology development, take advantage of the fact that it's secure, it's safe, and then be able to kind of freely tokenize their own business, their own assets on top of that. And that's why we built it.
Is the KYC component dependent on whether your customers are using the tokenized process, or can it be two different things?
It's two different levels. Mm-hmm. So when you just join the network, you want to exchange back and forth, it's just a basic identity. But yeah, we do require token projects that issue tokens to actually verify that they are a real business, right? There's another level to that of verification that we do, and but we don't restrict, we don't judge, we just make sure everything is in the right place, and that it's the information's all available to everyone so that they can make their own decisions.
And you will know every one of your customers because you, Maxonrow, is using their own platform.
But keep this in mind, the benefit of having these blockchain-based KYC is that your data is not owned by us either.
That's true.
We know that you went through the system and we know that you were identified, but we as a company do not keep your data, and we do not own it, and we do not sell it to other people.
Super private.
Yeah, it's
and
private.
Secure.
And we are adding the identity chain itself, so that's actually secured in a blockchain, so that you can be assured that as long as they don't have your keys, they don't have your phone.
And you mentioned about one of your meetups that if you forget is it your access?
Oh, don't talk about that. That's the blockchain
That's
industry. No, the paper keys. One of the, I'd say one of the responsibilities that customers have to realize is that when they own it, no one else has it.
Right.
So better keep it safe.
You mentioned that most of your career has been in Asia. How is it? How is it living there, working there? If you can't
I
go
love
there.
it. So I love to come back to the U.S. My family's now in Boston, so I love to come back to the U.S. and visit, but it's most definitely a visit. I've been in Shanghai, Shenzhen, Taipei, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, various times, and I absolutely love spending most of my time over there. And you'll know when you're in that region, a beach is only a short flight away.
Yes.
So I love the beach.
Well, I could talk about blockchain forever. I wish this was longer. We have to end soon. I hope you go to New York soon again in a few months, hopefully.
Come back. Yep.
And I look forward to having you again at the show to talk about the changes that happen from now until then and anything that's going on that's new in the space. Plus the fact that I need to learn more and I love to talk about it.
Maybe just find something to tokenize.
Yes.
Next time we'll talk about it. Hey, how would I tokenize this?
Yes, that's a good idea. So I will test it out myself, and then we can talk about any issues that I find.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have anything else that you want to? Do you have anything else that you want to share?
No, I would like to say something to the viewers. If you're out there right now, if you're interested in blockchain, if you've been hearing the hype, the meetups are there to explain in detail and give people opportunities to understand the various aspects of the industry, what we're doing, and then there's other companies in their space doing their meetups. But I would encourage you, if you have anything that you want to know about blockchain, tokenization of securities, tokenization of assets, come to a meetup, meet us, talk to us, tell us about your business. This technology is for entrepreneurs, so please take the time to come out and let us know what you're doing and what you're thinking about, and let's see if we have an opportunity to help you do that.
Yes, and one of the meetups is happening today at 6 o'clock, so please find us on Eventbrite. You can look for Maxonrow or blockchain events, and we'll hope to see you. And if you register, find us this evening and say hello. Thank you for being with us, and look forward to having you in a couple of weeks at the next Facebook Live. And thank you, Mark, for being here, and I look forward to the event tonight.
It's a pleasure, thank you.